Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region, and welcome to this Free State Colorado interview. Today, I'm joined by Cindy Stein, a Colorado mom whose teenage child ran away from home to live with an LGBT activist teacher and trans identifying male husband. You may have heard of this story because of the trans identifying man is JoAnn Smotherman, who ran for Colorado State Senate last year. Well, Cindy, I hope you're well, and thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. I'm glad to be here.
Well, Cindy, let's start at the beginning. What can you tell us about your child, who is 16 years old at the time, and their relationship with his teacher?
Yeah, so my kiddo met JoAnn Smotherman at Durango High School. JoAnn was the teacher, and the first time that my kiddo had this teacher, there wasn't a whole lot to like. There was a lot of clashing, and at that time, my kiddo was a sophomore. And so I heard a lot about how JoAnn was very vocal about being a lesbian, and she had pride flags in her classroom. And in my opinion, looking back, probably shared quite a bit too much about her personal life. And that was sophomore year. So kind of fast forwarding into my kiddo's junior year, JoAnn was the math teacher again. And what was different start junior year was that I had just gone through a really aggressive cancer treatment. Um, and it was 5 days in the hospital. It wasn't just, your average in and out when I was sick. And I think that my kiddo was very, very vulnerable. Nobody knew if mom was really going to be okay. They just watched me fight for my life. And JoAnn, I think, again, looking back, probably had a quote unquote safe space where my kiddo could relate, could vent, could, get the warm fuzzies that I wasn't able to provide. And it's my opinion that this whole story started at that point. Uh, my kiddo is also a few months into junior year diagnosed with ADHD, also on the spectrum. So my kid is not only vulnerable emotionally from watching me battle cancer, but my child is struggling to make friends, keep friends, relate to other kiddos. My child was bullied a little bit, actually probably quite a bit, and really struggled in school. So this quote unquote safe space that was created in JoAnn Smotherman's classroom, I think was pretty appealing. My child found comfort and acceptance where that wasn't available with my child's peers. So I think that's really where it started. And again, my opinion is JoAnn Smotherman convinced my child that all of those issues, all of the bullying, all of the inability to fit in was because my child was born into the wrong body, that my child was truly a boy, and everything was going to be made better once the transition to a boy happened. And I really found out that this was happening in November of 2024, where I started that mom spidey sense started to kick in. I knew there was something going on. I knew there were some influences down here that I didn't like. So I told my kiddo that my kid was going to move up to Denver to live with my mom because I needed the separation from what was brewing down here. My middle child kicked out the screen of the bedroom window and ran away. And I didn't know where my child was for 24 hours. So after my child ran away, the next day, which was a Sunday, I decided to go to my kiddo's employment and bring a jacket and a stuffy because that brought comfort. And what happened next just continues to blow my mind. My kid ran from work. So my kiddo was escorted out of the building by the security guard, and we weren't told. So we just kind of watched my child leave. And then we followed my kiddo as um, a path was cut up into town. And I'm on the phone with Durango PD because I'd called my kiddo in as a runaway. I had no idea where my child was. And so we had a showdown in downtown Durango with PD, my child locked in a restaurant bathroom. And it was that day that I met JoAnn Smotherman for the first time and found out that she'd been harboring my child. So this is a teacher. This is somebody who's still at Durango High School that's supposed to be in a position of authority, a position of trust, never had the courtesy to call me and tell me that my child was with her. So I had no idea. And so at the restaurant, uh, my child, and again, I think because of the grooming process, was probably programmed to tell law enforcement that self-harm would happen and absolute refusal to come home, and that definite suicide attempt would be made if my child was to return to my care. And so I also found out that night that JoAnn Smotherman had an attorney on speed dial and was already working against my parental rights. She was trying to do everything in her power to keep me from bringing my child home. And so what happened next is that my kiddo went to a mental facility 3 hours from here. That was at the decision of the Access Mental Health Crisis Counselor decided that was best for my kid. I had no input on that. And that's when I also found out that parents don't have a lot of parental rights in Colorado. So since my kid was over the age of 12, definitely over the age of 15, my kid had the right to choose whatever counselor, therapist that was desired, and communication with me did not have to happen. My child had the option to decide who was communicated with. So a week was spent in this mental facility, and they would not tell me anything. It got to the point where I'm calling every day to check in, hoping that my child has given permission to speak to me, because until that happened, I couldn't find anything out. So I was finally told by the facility, we can neither confirm nor deny whether your child is here. I had to call the local police department to call my kiddo in as a runaway and possible kidnapping because I didn't know if my child had been released without my permission to somebody else. It got to be that bad. I could not believe that my rights had been stripped so thoroughly. And eventually, it turned out that my kiddo came home with me, but we had a really rocky 6 weeks here in the house. Um, CPS stepped in at that point, and they dictated how we were going to treat my middle child. And if we did not affirm this new identity, this new gender, then my child would no longer be in my custody. So and that was even before 1312 was passed. So even before that point, they were already taking that authority away from parents.
Wow, incredible. I mean, what a nightmare. So hard to imagine. I know people out there, a lot of parents can't imagine what this would be like to have to go through this. I mean, how long was this relationship going on, you think, or this kind of, background kind of conversations and hidden conversations been going on between Smotherman and your child, do you think, before it all accumulated?
I think a good year and a half before it really came to a head, November of 24 when my kiddo kicked out the screen and ran away. So I try not to, feel too guilty, but I had no idea. I mean, my middle child was a master at not saying anything. And one thing I would caution other parents if they think they might be or they are starting to go through this. If your child pulls away, becomes very quiet, one of the early signs that we saw was an eating disorder. So my kiddo stopped eating. And uh, there are warning signs if you kind of know what to look for. So that was one of the biggest where my child just stopped. My child spent all of free time in the bedroom with the door closed, and I thought that I thought that my kiddo was just kind of going through that teenage angst. I wanted to give some space and not be the helicopter parent, but in hindsight, I should have been more aggressive and been and kind of butted my way in and tried to keep the relationship that we did have healthier.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, how do you know what your teenager's going through? We've all been through those years. It is difficult for everybody. And how irresponsible, in my opinion, for a teacher or some other adult to come in there and say, hey, here's a magic pill you can take. Here's the silver bullet. Here's the snake oil that's going to alleviate all your problems. When the reality is these awkward stages of life are totally normal. I mean, it's just something we got to go through. Of course, there's different situations and challenges we all face, and there's not an
Right,
easy solution, and especially not something so extreme for somebody who's so
right,
vulnerable to be pulled into. I mean, it's absolutely frightening.
right. And then the one of the worst parts of this is, fast forwarding to January of, I believe this year. I'm sorry, my years are starting to blend at this point. But I did go up to Smotherman's house and I tried to get my kiddo back. And so I called JoAnn. I told her straight up, said, my child does not have permission to be here. I want you to pack everything up and send my kiddo out. And I want you to encourage this. And her response to me was, I'm going to call the attorney and I'll call you back. So again, this is a teacher, somebody in a position of trust and authority who is actively keeping my child from me. And when I called 911 to get some help in retrieving my child, the Plata County Sheriff's Department just absolutely failed me. And they took their time getting there. And when they went up to the house to talk to everybody inside, they went, and you can see the body cam footage in that Daily Wire article. The officer went to my child and said, "You're okay, right?" It didn't separate anybody, just, "You're okay, right?" What else is, what else are you gonna say? Yeah, I'm good. So on the way back out from that, they can be heard, the officers, laughing and talking about how I'm just going to have a meltdown and or absolutely zero help. And, my kiddo was 17, almost 18, and that was a lot of what I heard from everybody, not just law enforcement, but attorneys, other therapists, that, you know, sh- your kid's almost 18. There's nothing we can do.
Wow.
Which really means your kid's almost 18. We're going to do nothing for you.
Do you know who the attorney was that Smotherman was using?
Yes, J. Paul LaRoe here in Durango.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Just curious because there's this whole network of individuals, it seems, who are kind of working together to really, in my mind, be predators and take advantage of these kids who are in troubled situations and separate them from their parents, pull them into this what I would say is a dangerous ideology. And
Yeah.
it's shocking that this is happening. And I really appreciate you coming forward, sharing your story, and being so public about this because I can't imagine actually how difficult it would be. So I really appreciate you and thank you for really getting everything out there about this.
Yeah, I appreciate having a platform to share. Other parents definitely need to know this does happen. This isn't a made up story. This is something, especially with the passing of 1312, that can now legally happen anytime, anywhere. as soon as my kiddo said the word trans, I'm trans, my rights went out the window. Yeah, other parents need to be aware. And is if they, and that's all it takes for their kiddo is for their child to say, I'm trans, and they're going to have the fight of their lives on their hands.
Unbelievable. Now, you mentioned your child has ADHD and is autistic on the spectrum you had mentioned. What role do you
Yes.
think that played in terms of being groomed and being preyed upon by this adult?
I think it had everything to do with it. Um, my kiddo is too trusting, and I think that's a trait of the autism that, again, I'm speculating, but I think that JoAnn Smotherman came from a position of authority to tell my child, your parents are bad, your parents are evil, you're a boy, they're never going to accept you, and being unsure of life and what life was going to look like and the trauma of my illness, I think my kiddo just bought it hook, line, and sinker. You shouldn't have trusted JoAnn Smotherman.
Yeah. Yeah, I could definitely see how somebody in a very vulnerable situation. I mean, and unfortunately, this is the reality. And that part of the story, I think, is something a lot of people can be familiar with. It's unfortunately been going on for a long time where you have vulnerable children being preyed upon by adults who have bad intentions. And now it's taken to a whole nother level here in Colorado because they have legal protection. They have actually the political machine behind them to allow them
Yes,
to do this. And that's one of the scary parts. And I think something that really people need to wake up to and be aware of, and we got to push back on this, I really think.
I agree. There's been no consequences for JoAnn Smotherman. She's gotten away with this. And I don't want to try to speak for Erin Lee, but I think she's kind of experiencing the same thing with Poudre Valley, that teacher with the art club is still active, still going.
What?
JoAnn Smotherman isn't with Durango High School anymore. She's with the Adult Education Center, which is a nonprofit, but they're sheltering her. They haven't fired her, and they continue to let her have study groups with even younger kids and still giving her a pool in which to do this again.
Wow. Yeah, definitely predators out there who are protected by law, who are being allowed to really groom and take advantage of these vulnerable children. I mean, it's outrageous, and people should be up in arms about it ultimately. But I'm curious how the whole Child Protective Services, the CPS situation went. How did they get involved? What role did they play in this situation?
Okay. Uh, so mentioning the Adult Education Center, and that's where JoAnn Smotherman is still currently a teacher. I wrote a letter to them and I explained what had happened the night my kiddo ran away and JoAnn's involvement in that. And I cannot believe their response. I put on my big girl clothes and I took a printed copy of it to the school, gave it to the director, and the director's response was, "Well, I cannot believe that you've done this. I feel sorry for your child." And really made me feel like I was the problem. And when I was leaving, I heard that the director tell the front desk person, I'm calling Child Protective Services on this one. And sure as you know what, the very next day, that's when I get a call from CPS. And that's when we started down that road. And so we had two interviews. We had to go through the basic questions of do you have enough food, shelter, what is life like? We had to pass all of that basic stuff and then pretty much promise and play along with the ideology that I'm going to affirm, I'm going to use a new name, I'm going to use new pronouns. And um, but yeah, play along is what we had to do. Otherwise,
Yeah,
my kiddo wouldn't have come home.
right. I mean, legally, you don't have a choice, right? I mean, the law, the way it's written, the way it's put together is you really have to play along with it all, or you lose even more. You lose everything at that point. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, definitely. Yes, nowadays with the law having passed, if you don't affirm, then you will lose custody of your child.
Now, what would you say to parents out there who maybe are concerned that this could be happening to their kids? Any pieces of advice, anything you recommend, anything that people should be really looking out for?
Definitely. Again, kind of like I mentioned before, some of the red flags if your child withdraws from you or your family, or maybe starts talking about a teacher or some other trusted adult, I would definitely investigate who that adult is and what their agenda is. Check out their social media. And if I had done that, I would have seen JoAnn Smotherman. She is very active and huge activist for the trans community. And if you can, I would say even go to the extremes of pulling your child out of public school. If you can homeschool at that point, I think it's warranted because they're getting that affirmation from somewhere. And as we know, it's public schools are just infiltrated with it. So I like the analogy of there's a faucet that's been turned on. Feeding your child this information and those ideologies, turn the faucet off. And if that means you pull your kid out of school, then do it. If you need to move out of state, do it. Um, I would also say that if it's getting really worrisome, take away the phones, take away the computers, shut off the social media. It's not just Instagram, it's not just TikTok, but it's YouTube videos as well. The kids are getting all this from. Um, Also, be wary of where they go. My kiddo was down at the Rainbow Youth Center getting free supplies for this transition. And so just be wary of that. And I have to put in a plug for this book. It's Lost in Transnation by Miriam Grossman. This has been huge, explaining where this started and some of the things you can do with your children if you feel like they're starting to go down this path. So to me, that's been a huge, huge resource.
Great. Yeah, I'll put a link at freestatecolorado.com along with the article, the Daily Wire article, and your speech at the state capitol earlier this year. Some good resources there. And I just can't express my appreciation enough for you being outspoken and really speaking out and getting involved. I mean, it's crazy. It's something people need to be aware of. Things need to change here in Colorado because this is not right.
Yes.
And I mean, and honestly, my own personal opinion, I think it's gross and wrong that you have adults. I mean, adults talking to kids, talking to young adults, young kids, teenagers about sexuality, about
Yes.
gender, talking about these things. There's no place for that. These adults should not be having those conversations and having private conversations with young kids about these
Agreed.
kind of things. It's wrong. I mean, ultimately, fundamentally, it's disgusting and wrong in my personal opinion, and it's happening all over to the
I
point where
agree.
they're pulling kids away from their parents, pulling kids away from their families, and turning them into their own way, I guess, is a way to put it. But
Yeah.
something you had said is that even Smotherman was now referring to your kid as their son. Is that accurate?
Yes. There's been plenty of Facebook posts where Joanne has referred to my child as her son. And I
Gotcha.
haven't had contact with my child since December of last year.
Wow.
And yeah, I don't know exactly what's going on, but I do believe that Joanne has taken over my child's cell phone. Recently contacted me pretending to be my child and demanding money from me, and then blocked my number again. So I don't, there's something really sinister going on in that household.
Definitely. It's hard to believe. I mean, I guess it's not hard to believe, but that's the reality, folks, is that these people do not face any consequences. They're protected by law, and it's creating horrible situations. And I can't help but think, but years from now, people hopefully will be looking back on situations like this and just saying, how could this be allowed to happen in our society? Because it's
Right.
not right. Well, Cindy,
Yeah.
what any final thoughts, any other things that people need to know about this situation, or maybe something they need to know about that can help their own families?
Yeah, I'll throw one thing out just in general. Something a lot of people have said, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help. Running for a local school board or getting on some kind of public office where we can start to turn the tide away from this liberal view of what's allowed would be a great first step. And as far as what parents can do for their kiddos, I would just encourage parents to listen to your children, to engage with them, put your own phones down, you know, talk to your kids and try to keep that relationship as healthy as possible. Because when the speed bumps come, if that relationship isn't there, kids are going to wander and they're going to fall prey to things that they don't feel like they can talk to their parents about.
No, and that's a great point too. And you mentioned earlier the social media and YouTube and everywhere out there. There's so many avenues for these people with bad intentions or predatory ideas to get involved with kids and reach them in all these different levels. I mean, even from playing video games online, people
Yes.
predators have been using that to try and get kids. And it's like it's not
Yeah.
it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And of course being in the schools is the worst part of it all because that's a government created sanctioned taxpayer thing. And I mean
Yeah.
it's the worst part of it, but nonetheless people need to be aware that yeah, it's really every avenue and every aspect of that where people with bad intentions can have access to your kids without you even knowing about it.
Exactly.
Well, I
Yeah.
really appreciate your time, Cindy. Thank you so much for speaking out, for being active, and I wish you the best. I hope things come around. I'm very hopeful and optimistic that eventually things will change, but I really appreciate your time today, and
Yeah.
keep us updated if there's anything else that we need to be aware of.
I sure will. Thank you again for having me.
Perfect. Well, take care. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks.